Hello everyone, Jeff with the Green Review. We're growing raspberries, blackberries, grapes, blueberries, apples, cherries, pears, and peaches in our little backyard orchard here. What happens when we get extremely cold temperatures? We just had a polar vortex go through, so what can we expect to happen to our fruit possibility for this next year? The raspberries and blackberries in this area right here have two sets of flowering times potentially. The first year that a stem comes up from the ground, it is called a primocane. The primocane may flower on the ends of the branch, out at the end, in this springtime, and fruit will develop over the summer, and you'll be able to harvest that in late summer, early fall. That primocane survives the winter, and then in the second year becomes what is called the florocane. The florocane sends out side branches that bloom on the ends of them during the spring of that second year, and you'll get the fruit in maybe 4th of July, late June, early July. So we have primocanes that come up and may or may not flower and bloom on, and so you could get fruit in the fall. And then you have florocanes, which you get fruit in this early spring, early summer. Now, in the winter time right here, everything is a florocane. The primocanes have not come up yet this year. So the primocanes are still buds in the crowns of these raspberries and blackberries. And we have red raspberries here that will send out blooming primocanes this year, so we will still potentially get fruit, unless the crowns have actually died too. The florocanes that are here, that are the second year, potentially have died. They might be able to send some new growth. We'll see. And so if we do get new growth out of these, then we will get fruit in the spring of this next year. So these are the tops of these plants were exposed. Now the blackberries tend to be only blooming on florocanes, not primocanes. So if any primocanes come up this year, we'll have to wait until next year and hopefully have a better winter to be able to get fruit off of those. So we have potentially fruit on these florocanes, and we have potentially some fruit on the primocanes on the raspberries. We're just going to have to wait and see how they grow this year, see if the polar vortex cold temperatures did any damage. Now the snow insulated the crowns of these plants, so if the florocanes up here all die, we will still be able to get new primocanes that will be able to produce fruit put on the raspberries and then survive next year and get fruit on the blackberries. Now the blueberries bloom on flower buds that were produced in the previous late summer and early fall. So the flower buds for this year's blueberries are already on this plant over the winter time. So there's potential that the branches that were exposed above the snow cover have died, and those flower buds are dead, and the flower buds that were under the snow were protected. So we tried to throw as much snow up onto these blueberries as possible. Other blueberries we have in different places, we tried covering with snow as much as possible as well. So we'll just have to wait until the early spring to see if these flower buds survive. If the tops have died, we'll just prune those out and go from the plants that are under the snow and get new branches to replenish this, and then hopefully next winter we won't have as bad a winter and we'll be able to get the fruit off of these next year. And it's possible that they survive because blueberries are much hardier than a lot of other flowering plants, and so we'll see how well they did. Now grapevines bloom on short branches that are produced in the spring. So these long vines that are on here now will get pruned out in the late winter, and there'll just be some short branches, the trunks left on the plant. Those are going to send out new long branches that will grow across the trellis vine wires, and they will send out short side branches that will produce the flower buds So the long branches on this plant may be dead, may be alive, doesn't matter. They're going to be pruned away, and the new growth that comes in the spring is going to produce the flower buds. So we're not very worried at all on the grapes producing this year. The buds and branches on apples, cherries, and pears are much hardier than many other fruit plants. And so it's very likely that they survived even a polar vortex without any trouble. The best way to buy your trees is to make sure that you know your hardiness zone and that the trees you're planting are appropriate for your hardiness zone. There are apple trees and other fruit trees that are appropriate for the north, and some that are appropriate for the south, some that don't need very much winter chill to go through for dormancy to break, and then they'll grow in the spring. If you have a southern variety planted too far north, it could try to grow too early in the spring and get frosted. In the deep part of the winter, they should all be dormant. It shouldn't be any problem. But if you buy the appropriate tree for your climate, especially the hardiness of the winter lowest temperatures, you should be fine. The trees that are damaged will show brown decaying bark areas. The buds, if you cut them in half horizontally, will be brown on the inside. There's really no reason to do any of that testing until the spring. When the trees start leafing out, you'll find out which branches and which buds didn't make it, and you'll just do the pruning that's appropriate for that tree to recreate the scaffold branches and things that the shape that you want. So wait until spring and see what happens on your fruit trees. Now we also have a peach tree here and a peach tree here. Now everybody knows that peach trees aren't as hardy, that they are grown in Georgia, but they also can be grown, depending on the variety, in Vermont and Minnesota and other places farther north. Now the ones in Michigan are grown on the west shoreline of Michigan, the eastern shore of Lake Michigan, so they are protected by the lake effect from Lake Michigan. The rest of us who are in the north, who are trying to grow a peach tree, need to try to grow varieties that are very, very hardy. So there are varieties like Contender and Intrepid that are very hardy and can be grown in zone 4, and other varieties like Red Haven and Reliance that are grown more in zone 5. So we have the possibility of growing these trees in the north. Now there's several different considerations for winter hardiness. One is for the whole plant, the roots, trunk, the branches, the leaf buds, and the flower buds, and how well they'll survive a really cold winter. We just had a polar vortex, and the temperatures dropped into the negative 20s and lower in Fahrenheit. So it's very, very cold, and so these peach trees may or may not be hardy for that bitter cold in the wintertime. So in this case, we did some protection by putting these white cloths over the top. They are plastic on the outside and cloth on the inside. They're a painter's cloth, drop cloth kind of material. And we don't want dark colors because we don't want any sunlight to warm these areas up. And we just want to be able to protect these plants from the bitter cold, especially at night. We also put inside of these areas some rain barrels. And then at night, when the temperatures were dropping, we put hot water from the faucet of the greenhouse through a garden hose out into these barrels, and we were able to keep the area inside of these, where the peach trees are at, 25 degrees warmer than this outside air right next to it. We have thermometers next to each other here, and so we were able to keep these peach trees 25 degrees warmer. So they were closer to 0 Fahrenheit instead of negative 25 Fahrenheit. Now we have a Contender peach here and a Red Haven peach here, and so both of these trees are supposed to be hardy for those winter temperatures down to that 0, negative 10 kind of range. There's a second kind of hardiness though that we need to be concerned about, and that is the flower bud hardiness, not just in the winter time but also in spring. As the flower buds expand, they start losing their hardiness, and so even a light frost around 32 degrees, which is much 50 degrees warmer than these winter polar vortex temperatures, that still could kill the flower buds. So Red Haven here is a late bloomer. it has the flower buds that bloom much later than the other one, so it misses some of those frosts that are still around in the springtime, and so it helps to have two types of hardiness on our peach trees: winter hardiness and then flower bud hardiness and late blooming. The Red Haven peach survived the winter. It had a little bit of dieback in a few little places, a few branches, but overall it is done just fine. It did not have any flowers this year, and we're okay with that. As long as it survived, we can hope that next winter won't be so bad and we can get past the polar vortex and we can have some peaches next year. It is doing very well right now, and so we're hoping that it's setting some good flower buds. Now the contender peach down at the other end here has grown gigantic this year. It had 5 flower buds that survived, and it had 1 peach, and the peach was getting large in size, and then a raccoon or a possum got it, and I'm very upset about that. So now I have an electric fence wire around the base of all these trees in this whole orchard area, so hopefully I won't have that problem in the future. But for now, the tree is growing very, very well. In fact, it's growing so well that I might have to cut the top off this winter in my late winter, early spring pruning, and try to get the branches down lower. I had it topped off last year, hoping they'd get some branches down lower to grow, but instead it sent out new branches and just screamed up really high. So we will see what decision we make on that later and see if we can get peaches. But that contender peach did have flower buds that survived and 1 peach that made it through the polar vortex. And this is Jeff with a Green Review. Thanks for watching.